Right, good morning, folks, and welcome to our last, what I call structured cafe. I'm Jenny Milne. We do have a cafe next month, but it's what I call a free-for-all. Anybody can come along and speak, but today we've got two fantastic speakers, one from Scotland and one from Finland. So at one point in time, you probably will remember this, but if you're not familiar with SRITC, then please mute yourself just now. Use the chat box, it's your friend. It's usually used for weather updates and your introductions. And also, if you've got any ideas or thoughts when the two speakers are going, please do put it in the chat, and then we can come to you at the end. I was asking people what they've got for coffee and cake. I have my cup of tea, and I also have my delightful millionaire shortbread from Nethybridge Coffee Shop, one of my favourite coffee shops. Yeah, anybody else got cake? Who said they'd gone for cake? Sarah, you gone for cake? What have you got? You there, Sarah? She's gone. I'm looking at people's cameras. There's too many of you. Can't see you all. But I need to see Suzanne's got a cup of tea. So that's at least, oh, you've got dairy milk or something. You got chocolate.
Yeah, I've got a mini roll.
A mini roll. It'll be a mince pie next time, won't it? Because it'll be Christmas time.
Yes.
Anyway, keep eating and drinking while I'm talking away, and I'll do that when the speakers are going. So for those of you that haven't come across SRITC before, we are a fairly large community of over 600 different organisations and people, over 19 countries it is, believe it or not. And we all share our passion for rural and island transport, whether you're in Germany, whether you're in Finland, or whether you're in Australia. And I'm now embarrassing somebody who's on this call, and it's Liz. And I'm sharing this picture because Liz and I managed to meet after 5 years. And if you didn't read your news bulletin this week, then you won't know this. If you did read it, you do know it. So I'm now putting a face to a name. So Liz has been very much part of the SRITC community for the last 5 years. And where we met, put it this way, there was no coffee shop open, was there, Liz? And there was no toilet facilities open. But Liz did bring the coffee and cake, and that was the most important part, aside from getting big hugs. So really nice, and that's what SRITC is all about for me, is actually getting to see people in person that have the same passions. So what else do we do? We also facilitate bringing together lots of people on different knowledge themes. We're doing that at the moment along the theme of tourism, car clubs, car sharing, and water transport. So there's a lot going on in the background that you may or may not have clocked. We also, aside from the cafes, get involved in projects for stakeholder engagement, and some of you have been involved in those projects as well. And obviously we had the Social Value Cafe just 10 days ago, which you can find out more about social value if that's on your radar. So some of the people and faces to names. I've already seen that Rubina's here. She's on our advisory board. I've got Artemis. She's also here today. I don't know if Magnus is here from Sweden because I haven't quite seen who's all come in. But these are the people that you may hear about and see that are helping. So thank you very much to them. What's currently going on in my inbox? It is a bit of a puzzle, which is why I've used this as an image. The first one at the top backwards is bus cuts. Thank you very much to all of you that have sent in information about bus cuts and how they've affected you. If you haven't done so, please do so today. And then I'm going to be speaking with various different people about the situation that we've got from bus cuts. And this started with the situation in Dumfries and Galloway, which then resulted in me being on the BBC TV News. The other thing in the inbox at the moment is social value, and that's been on the back of the cafe. And interestingly enough, I was sitting listening to a bus forum group last night, and it was, how do you prove the value of just having a few people on the bus? As I've mentioned, we've got quite a few focus groups involved. Some of you have reached out and you wish to be involved in the car meeting that's taking place on Monday. That's about car clubs, car sharing, peer-to-peer. So if you'd like to be involved in that, just drop a message just now in the chat and Nikki will add you to that one. And then the following week, we have a focus group on tourism. The last thing to be in my inbox at the moment, and it's not last for least of importance, but it's very important, is the electric vehicle situation with the changes that are taking place at Charge Place Scotland. So if you're affected by these, or you're interested in the grant that's available at the moment through Transport Scotland for EV infrastructure, then by all means get in touch. But we also will be discussing this on Monday in our Focus group. So without further delay, I'm going to introduce two speakers to you. And it's actually in the order that they're going to speak. Becky's going to speak first, and she's going to give us the Scotland lens of what's been going on at the moment with one of her projects. And then we're going to fly over to Finland. And just to confuse you, yes, there are two Jennies today. And Jenni, I keep calling her Urquhart because I'm used to her maiden name. Jenni will be providing a bit of an insight into life of a project that she's been doing in Finland. So without further ado, Becky, do you want to share your slides? And hopefully we can kick off because it all worked beforehand. And I can see it's coming slowly.
Let's see if it's still working now.
Yep.
Okay. I have pressed from beginning. Okay.
Yep.
Is that coming up okay?
We're just about there. We are there. I will hand over.
Brilliant. And bonus points for anyone who can identify the ferry route in my introductory slide.
Oh, I'm sure there'll be somebody, so don't worry.
Okay. Sorry, I was trying to have it on speaker view, which it's not at the moment. Let's see. No,
we can see.
Sorry.
We can now see all 13 slides.
Yeah. Right. Presenter view. There we go. We're there. We're there. Okay. Right. Sorry. I would like to tell you a little bit about the project that I'm working on at the Poverty Alliance, where I'm the development officer for Argyll and Bute. And if you don't know us, the Poverty Alliance is Scotland's national anti-poverty charity. We're a network organisation with just under 500 member organisations. Taking action on rural poverty is a 3-year project that is funded by the Robertson Trust and is entering its final year. We are working in 2 very different local authorities. We've got Aberdeenshire on the east coast of Scotland and Argyll and Bute on the west. We are focusing on reducing the extra costs of living rurally on a low income. And we're working to bring lived experience of poverty into the conversation and into decision making, as well as supporting rural organisations to collaborate, and I advocate for their anti-poverty work. The project is also helping to give a stronger focus to rural issues in our wider work as an organisation. And I should say it isn't a transport-specific project, but it is obviously an issue that's really key for rural communities. And I'm hoping I can give you a wee flavour of where it's come through in our different strands of work and how we're using it to push for change. I am getting a message saying my internet connection is unstable, so let me know if I am cutting out. So who are we hearing from about transport poverty issues? We are working with the Citizens Panel in Aberdeenshire and one in Argyll and Bute. We also host quarterly anti-poverty networking meetings where we provide a range of training and support for local organisations and get involved in local campaigning. And we're hearing from people involved in the wider organisation living rurally, but not within our 2 project areas. I'm going to focus on examples of what we hear from people with lived experience of living on a low income or whose costs are very high because of where they live. Because I feel like that's probably where we're sharing something with a slightly different focus from what you'll be hearing elsewhere. Having said that, it's really clear that the issues that are being raised are pretty universal. It's often more that the impacts of those can be so much greater for people living on a low income. I've listed some of the main ones here. I think we're all familiar with the idea of a rural premium, that there are direct costs to transport because of needing to travel longer distance to access day-to-day services. And of course, this has knock-on effects like things like extra hours paid for nursery because the journey times involved in getting to and from your work, or shorter working hours that are available between bus times. Most of us living rurally probably have a moan about needing a car to get anywhere. And on a low income, that forced reliance on a car you really can't afford can be pushing you into debt or keeping you there. We probably actually hear more in our rural participation work about the indirect costs or impacts, the limited options, absence of choice and lack of opportunities that come from these challenges. I kind of think of it as the negative space of the things that are not done because you couldn't, and the impact that has on your life and your well-being, as well as your finances. Talking about social value is, as you were at start, is really apt because we're often struggling with how you put a price tag on things like a child not being able to hang out with their friend during the holidays because the bus is only during term time. And of course, all of this creates further inequality in terms of access to health, employment, and even charitable support like advice services or food banks and pantries that are based in town. I put access to healthcare in a bigger font because I'd say it's the unifying theme across both of our project areas, is people facing long, expensive and complicated journeys to centralised health services. Looks a bit different across the two local authorities, and we could kind of talk about that if that's of interest later. And what comes through a lot is a frustration that people have of systems that don't account for any of this, or they don't talk to one another, like not being given appointment times that you can't get to. I wanted to share a couple of examples of how that plays out for individuals and give you a sense of how we're using this stuff. So there's a quote from a wheelchair user for whom his entitlement to free bus travel is pretty meaningless because he can't access the route. An islander describing some really great resources that exist locally and how the community kind of pulls together to create those, but they don't always link up with other services, like if you have to fly off the island for a hospital appointment. And then there's a couple of examples of panel members describing a 4-hour wait between buses if she goes to pick up a prescription, or a village resident whose only bus access is at the start and end of the school day. And then similarly, a quote from on the costs side of things from someone in a one-parent family living in a village with really limited bus service, reliant on a car to access employment, to get the kids out and get to the shops, and just how precarious that is if something happens that adds to those extra expenses, in this case, having a crash and only having third-party insurance. And then just another one there from a remotely located patient talking about bearing the costs of accessing healthcare on the mainland because the overnight stay isn't fully covered. I do worry that when we present quotes from participation, we bring a focus to the problems, and it's really important that we're also creating opportunities to share ideas about change, about how things could be better, but trying to be careful that we're not just putting the onus on people in the most difficult circumstances to come up with the solutions. So I wanted to give you a couple of examples of how we're doing that. A big one is that our panels identified topics that are important to them and shared their experiences and ideas about potential solutions. They did that pretty early in the project to help set our direction, so that when we're doing things like inviting decision makers to engage with them about changes, we're inviting the right people in and we know what they want to talk about. During Challenge Poverty Week, our big annual campaigning week across Scotland, we brought a group of people with lived experience to talk to the Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs about child poverty, and transport was part of what they included in that. Both of our citizens panels and some organisations we've worked with have participated in things like our input to the development of the Scottish Government's Rural Delivery Plan and the Just Transition Plan, where they were not just sharing experiences, but also querying the choice of focus, suggesting changes and identifying the sorts of things that are missing. This one in particular is not a very pretty slide, but I've just highlighted examples of the kinds of things that they brought in that we weren't hearing from elsewhere in the Poverty Alliance, about things like how you connect, how important it is that you're connecting communities to the places that they need to get to, and including ferries when you're considering things like subsidising transport cost. I'm going to assume that you know about the Scotland Demands Better campaign and the march in Edinburgh a month ago, but appreciate not everyone in the room does, so can ask me about it afterwards. But we did a lot of engagement with rural communities, again focusing on Argyll and Bute, making flags to take their demands to the rally for people who couldn't be there in person. There was a lot about ferries and bus routes, but also access to community transport and roads that have been closed due to landslips. And at the moment, our policy and campaigns colleagues are developing a mini rural manifesto. So that's being guided by insights from panels, network meetings, and Scotland Demands Better, and it's got a focus on community transport. And here's a quick plug that we will also be discussing that at our national annual event next week, and you're very welcome to come along. I will stick the link in the chat afterwards. My last slide, I've got 30 seconds. I don't want to let you down, but I have not got a huge amount on the innovative solutions, maybe more of a reflection that we keep coming back to the vital role of community transport in rural areas, and that community transport has been innovating for a very long time to meet the varying needs of our communities. Within TARP, we see a huge range of charitable organisations of community transport organisations, from charitable organisations with staff to charity-run dial buses, volunteer drivers using their own cars, an island car club, sadly now defunct. But I can't think of a single one of these that isn't struggling to fundraise or facing public cuts or short of volunteers. In Argyll and Bute, at the same time that our community planning partnership is commissioning research into transport inequalities, our health and social care partnership has stated that it's looking to cut all of its remaining support for community transport. Several of our third sector organisations are looking at how we can work collectively to respond to this. So not just challenging the cuts, but also looking at the examples that are springing up elsewhere of the sector doing things completely differently. In some areas of Scotland, there's pressure being put on the NHS to collaborate better with community transport, moving them from recipient of funding to a more active role in decision making. We've been hearing from Dumfries and Galloway Connect about their plans to take over commissioning of millions of pounds of health and social care funding through a collective of third sector organisations, which would mean they would be running and commissioning community transport. And these are daunting but incredibly exciting initiatives to see coalescing. And they can only happen, obviously, by working together. I'm 1 minute over, so I will not spend time encouraging you to join the Poverty Alliance, which would be free for most organisations here. But I will finish there, and I'm really happy to chat with you afterwards.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you.
And your internet stayed stable, so you were fine. I will let Jenny now share her screens, but Becky, one or two people have put suggestions on where the ferry is in the chat, so you might want to have a look at that and see what the score is. So I will now hand over to Jenny, and I think her slides are coming. Now, I have to say at this point in time, this cafe was Jenny's idea, and I know not me, this Jenny idea. So I thank her very much for volunteering to put together a transport poverty cafe. So I'm really intrigued. I've known Jenny a very long time. So I'm looking forward to hearing about this project from Finland. So Jenny, do you want to just put it into
presentation mode? Is it now okay?
Yeah. It's not quite in presentation mode. Yep, yeah, it is now. Fab.
Okay.
Over to you.
Okay, great, thanks. So I'm Jenni Vestinen from VTT Technical Research Center of Finland, and I've been studying rural mobility for already some years. So I'm going to present you about this transport poverty in Finnish rural areas, about the project we did recently. And this map, I have translated some of the symbols or the colors, so the four last ones. So the green color is sparsely populated areas, so you can see that we have quite many of them in Finland. Okay, so about this presentation, so we had a project called like Energy and Transport Poverty in Finnish Rural Areas. So the project included also energy, but I'm presenting the transport poverty side. And we did it together with the University of Vaasa, and it was co-funded by Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry of Finland. And it was nearly a 2-year project that ended in the beginning of this year. And here I'm going to present you about so how transport poverty is manifested in Finnish rural areas based on a resident survey we did and also some interviews. And then I will also shortly present some of our policy recommendations, and we mostly used our other material, but then we made them also in several workshops. And I assume that most of you at least know what transport poverty means, but this was the first time that it was officially in an EU document. So there's a regulation about the Social Climate Fund, and there is a definition of transport poverty, and it has the topics of cost and limited access to transport and limited access to essential socioeconomic services and activities. So it's quite well covering different aspects of transport poverty. Okay, so we did this survey for rural residents, and it was in the end of 23 and January 24, and we had nearly 750 respondents. And I could say that practically most of them were like working aged people, like from 18 to 64. We didn't ask from minors because we were asking many questions about households and so on. So it's better ask from adults. But practically 2/3 of the respondents, they were female. Household size was 2. There were no minors, and they lived in sparsely populated areas, and they were in working life. We also asked about their income level, and they were quite well distributed among different income levels. So there wasn't any specific coming out of that. Okay, so then we asked that what kind of challenges their household faced regarding transport cost of services during 22-23. And we generally asked about that time because there were many changes going in energy and so on. And so I think for every rural people, they know that it's very car dependent. So driving is practically the only option, but can't afford it like used to. And also lack of public transport. So those are the main challenges in rural areas. There are also some other lacks of transport or high cost and so on. And generally in every question what we had, was it transport or energy, there was around 1/3 that didn't have challenges. So they continued living as previously, and everything was okay. But most of the people had challenges. And then we asked how their financial situation affected driving. So they were driving less, more than half were driving less. And then this is a transport poverty indicator, this forced car ownership. So due to car ownership, there are difficulties in paying for other basic needs, energy, food, rent, mortgage, and it was 11%. So it's quite a lot. And people were also skipping some car maintenance and repairs, among other challenges. Then we asked how they have solved their mobility challenges. So they were planning their routes and their mobility needs more carefully. And 25% they were skipping some trips regularly, which is quite high, I think. And 36% they used online services and met others virtually. Of course, we had a digital survey. So those who have the most digital challenges, for example, elderly people, they couldn't even answer. But even those who could answer, yeah, they had also, because we had a question about that, and they were people having digital challenges. And only 10% used carpooling or neighborly help. And then we asked that if they had to skip transportation due to high price or difficulty, what kind of trips they skipped. And mostly they were like trips to hobbies or shopping. But then there were also like visiting, for example, police or other services, service points. And 12% skipped healthcare visits. And 11% skipped work. So these are quite serious impacts what this transport poverty causes in rural areas. And then we asked that what has made the mobility difficult, and it was raised that there's no sufficiently safe mobility. For example, narrow roadside, no lighting, insufficient winter maintenance. But we didn't ask otherwise about the infrastructure or safety issues. But when we have open-ended questions in the end and we had interviews, it was a lot raised, that kind of issues. So the bad condition of the road that is causing also safety issues. And then, and also private road cost, because it's subsidized in Finland, but it depends how much in different municipalities and so on. But so private roads were also causing some challenges. Okay, so these are our policy recommendations. And I'm going to go through these green parts that are for transport. But generally, we were thinking that before starting to solve issues, we need to define what does mean transport poverty in Finnish context, and what are the indicators that we should be measuring. So it's the basis for all the development that those should be defined. So the first one is accessibility to essential services has to be ensured for all. So this is referring, for example, to well-being or healthcare services. So also when we are reforming the system and thinking the network, where are located healthcare services, so it should be taken into account that more you are centralizing, more you need to do transportation for those services. So that is one aspect. And then also that that everyone should have access to normal shops like grocery shops and that kind of things. Then about these mobility opportunities in rural areas have to be maintained and developed. So we all know that there's a limited or no public transportation. So we need to find innovative solutions, a new kind of solution. We have, at least in Finland, we have statutory transportation, school transportation, health and social transportation. So what we propose that they should be integrated and open for all. So every kind of transportation that exists, private or public, they should be integrated in order to have enough people participating. And of course, this kind of sharing services and rights sharing. We don't have any ride sharing app in Finland or system. It's often like Facebook groups. So that kind of things could be developed. And also we raised the question of taxis. It's very difficult for taxis in rural areas to maintain their business there, especially in the future. Yeah, and then the third one is infrastructure in rural areas has to be improved, and regulations and subsidy criteria for private roads have to be reformed. So generally the road network in rural areas is quite poor, and it causes that vehicles made break, and then there would be like a extra cost for companies driving because they have to go slow, and it's time and so on. So and of course it has these safety and security issues. But then this private road, like I said, is subsidized, but still it might be for some people quite high compared to their incomes and cost challenges in rural areas. And as it varies in every municipality, so there needs to be some work to be done. And it's also difficult to maintain the private roads, even though it wouldn't be a question of money. If you are, for example, elderly, you cannot do the maintenance by yourself. So it might be difficult in rural areas to find companies or people who would do that. Okay, so this was my part of the presentation. Thank you.